If you search for the craziest roller coasters in the world, you'll see a wide array of terrifying thrill machines. These are probably your usual suspects, like the towering Kingda Ka, Dudadampa, or Fujiyama. Maybe the crazy intense coasters like Hades, Iron Gwazi, or the Smiler. Or maybe just a super steep drop, like Cannibal, Yukon Striker, or Takabisha. While these all make for crazy rides, I believe there's one coaster so unprecedented it doesn't even make sense to look at. Even stranger, I bet you've never even heard of it. But before you see this monstrosity, a little context. While steel coasters existed well before 1959, their modern design is still widely attributed to aerodynamics tubular track innovation on the Matterhorn bobsleds at Disneyland. This sleek design was far more innovative and larger than any other steel coaster in the United States at the time, which was made up nearly exclusively of BA Shift Wild Mice and Alan Herschel Little Dippers, popping up all across the country through the 1950s. Aero would follow this up with two other models in the 60s, the Mine Train and the Mini Mine Train. These would feature far larger cars, seating many more riders, and began Aero on their trajectory as the most powerful steel coaster manufacturer for the next 2 decades. But at the same time, on the other side of the world, the United States is no stranger to revising history, and there's no exception with the story of the steel coaster. 7 years before the Matterhorn would open, the recovering nation of Japan would open its first ever roller coaster, Wave Coaster, at Takarazuka Garden Fields. While not featuring tubular track, the tiny steel coaster would begin a new chapter for not only Japan, but more notably, the brand new manufacturer, Sansei Yusoki. The next year would see the first coaster from another Japanese manufacturer, Togo, which used impressive manufacturing for the time to traverse a compact layout on top of multiple buildings. This would begin a mini coaster war in Japan through the 60s, taking off with Togo's jet coaster at Nagashima Spa Land in 1964. Opening before any Aero Mine coaster, this impressively long train seating 24 passengers would traverse a simple but long wooded layout and travel over water. Togo would follow this up with Cyclone at Toshimen the following year, with a far more dynamic layout and an extra car to seat 28 riders. To stand out, Sansei would take the game to a significantly higher level the next year with the opening of Giant Coaster at Fuji-Q Highland. Nearly double the length of Togo's previous coasters, this ride would live up to its title with a sprawling layout over 4,500 feet and topping Cyclone's height by over 20 feet. Keep in mind, this would open the same year as Aero's first mine train at Six Flags Over Texas, which Giant Coaster would crush statistically, and is most known for an insane escape act attempted where the train was blown up during the ride. 35度の急勾配です。あ、これ何ですか？火を吹きましたね。Togo would counter with their own giant coaster, later known as Two-Way Coaster at Korakuen Amusement Park. While not beating the height or speed of Fuji-Q's coaster, it would beat its length, with a nearly 5,000-foot layout entirely on top of a building in downtown Tokyo. After being bested by Togo yet again, it was time for Sansei to build a ride that would not only shock Japan, but the entire world. Being contracted to build a ride for the Japan World Exposition in Osaka for 1970, Sansei would go above and beyond and build a monster of a coaster known as Daidarasaurus. First of all, this coaster would use a massive train of 7 cars with 6 seats each for up to 42 riders, which were certainly the most passengers for any coaster at the time. This feat alone would be impressive enough to stand out against Togo, but this was nothing yet. Daidarasaurus would be a racing coaster, which was very unique for a steel coaster at the time, but not just any racing coaster. featuring not just 2 tracks, not 3 tracks, not even 4 tracks, but an unprecedented 5. You heard that right, a 5-track racing steel coaster in 1970. This shot of it going up the lift is all you need to see. 3 lifts would run parallel to 2 other slightly taller lifts, as the colorful trains would fly past each other in all kinds of directions. The layout was very limited, as you would expect, but the amount of steel required to even attempt such a massive ride for the time was simply unbelievable. The coaster also had the ability to simply devour through people with its size, easily sending over 1,000 riders an hour, even with slow operations. So what happened to Daidarasaurus, and why has it been forgotten? At some point after Expo 70, the land would be converted into a full park named Expo Land. During this transition, the 3 lower tracks were removed, and the 2 remaining tracks were combined into 1. This would actually make it the longest coaster in the world for a time at a whopping 7,677 feet, with new smaller trains as well. The park would receive many large coasters, including an Aero Loop and Corkscrew, a Mock Wild Mouse, and even a B&M invert. But most importantly, a stand-up coaster from Sansei's rival Togo named Fujin Reijin 2 would have a tragic accident in 2007 due to poor maintenance. This would lead to a massive change to inspections and standards across all rides in Japan, leaving many parks unable to afford to bring their rides into proper safe operating standards, and causing a handful of parks, including Expo Land, to close later that year. Many of the newer coasters were able to be relocated to parks around the world, but the giant 37-year-old Daidarasaurus would sadly be too cumbersome to continue its life elsewhere and would be scrapped. So there you have it. While roller coasters have obviously evolved over the years, this forgotten behemoth deserved to be highlighted for Sansei's pure ambition, as well as the incredible Japanese engineering for the time. Today we have Falcon's Flight as the unprecedented coaster on the horizon, but this 50-year-old ride built in the infancy of the steel coaster is almost as unrealistic of an idea today.